This video is going to cover one approach I use when it comes to designing new weapon skins or finishes. In this case, I'm going to use Faceit, the online competitive gaming platform. I'm sure most of you will be familiar with Faceit's broadcast and gaming network. I have provided a clickable link on screen to their channel, and I would highly recommend checking it out when you get a chance. Obviously, when I was approached by Faceit, it was a pretty daunting prospect, to have to come up with a design that is going to hopefully appeal to the community, but also be something that Faceit themselves would be proud to have as a visual representation of their network. When I have a design like that, or even a lot of designs that I've created have been started this way, it might not necessarily be for a brand, but the principles can run through anything that you want to design, to be honest. As you can see here, what we've got is the Faceit brand, and then at the top we have keywords. So from a keywords perspective, this brand to me was, all about the community. It was about progression, being able to move up tables, tournaments, ladders, prizes, and then obviously there is the professional element, which if you've ever watched their Twitch channel, you'll know it's the NIPs and the Fanatics, Titans, all the amazing professional Counter-Strike teams that play on a regular basis. So once I've broken a brand down into what I feel it represents, from there I'll break each one of these keywords down further. So for example, with community, within a community you'll normally have groups, clans, connections, friends, all that creates a community. With progression, you've got, generally you want to advance, people have ambition, you need to be ambitious to move forward and progress in these tournaments or in the tables. And generally in order to progress you need to improve, you need to be better than the person next to you. Now, obviously, I've done this for all the various keywords. Underneath these sort of definitions, I guess you could call them, underneath the definitions, what I have in white is a visual representation of these definitions. So, for example, when I think of something that advances or has progression, I think of arrows. I think of an arrow because it in itself has a direction. It has the element of progression in its visual graphic. Ranks are another great example. Visually, you can look at a corporal and then a sergeant, and it's visually progressed. Motion, motion blur, anything like that. That's another thing you can visually see and understand, and it gives you an impression of speed, but which also could relate to progression and advancing and improvement even. Repetition is a good example because generally in order to get better at something you have to do it more and more. Especially if you think of competitive gaming, the amount of hours that these professional players have to play in order to be at the level that is required to be a professional. But it goes into art as well. If you want to be better at drawing, then you need to do more drawing. You generally need to grow as a player, as a person, and you need to build. Both grow and build are similar, so arguably they could be dropped. But obviously, you can look at these other ones here, and some of them are a little bit vaguer, like tattoos, for example. You don't really relate tattoos to community, but my thinking was, obviously, you've got clans. Clans can often be considered, like tribal clans. And then from there you can get to tattoos. It doesn't need to be a perfect link, but often I find that just writing down as many things as I can will help me once I start designing. I might be stuck in an area and I can refer back to these, and one of these keywords might spark an idea that allows me to carry on. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take progression and I'm going to try and use these keywords and these definitions and show you some ways these could be visually represented. So, to start this off, I will draw an arrow. And now, you could literally do that. Now, obviously, it's not the best drawing in the world, but the principle is the same. You can see here that it leads to an element of progression. You're showing direction, you're showing progression. Repetition, again, helps with that progression. There's many, many ways you could do this. You could start off small and get larger, and that also works, so there's a progression element there. You could use spacing. I'll do that. And you could use size. So start off with this, add a bit of weight to it, a bit more weight, a bit more weight. Again, progression. Now all of these, I think, visually work as a progression element. Other things that you can do is, I'll just change my brush, so put on a transfer, set the fade, that's all done. You know, like that in itself is a progression. You know, you can visually see that this, you know, is progression. So it's not only size, it's color, it's you know, transparency, it's spacing, it's repetition. All of these work. The other one you can do is obviously a shape dynamic. So you know, that in itself looks like a progression. So if I go back to this, you know, those designs there visually represent, you know, arrows. That in itself, just a single arrow, can show progression. So let's close that. You know, that in itself, just its direction creates an element of progression. You know, it visually represents progression. So you've got arrows, ranks, I mean, not really showing that here, but motion, you know, I think this works as an element of motion. It shows progression, motion, speed even. Repetition, there's a lot of repetition in all of these designs I've done here. And even some of these could be argued as being growing, you know, like you've got that element of it's getting bigger, it's growing, you know, as you progress, you're growing as a player. Now, all of this principle is what I used to create this design. Now, if you look at this design, it might not be instantly obvious, but in the logo, you've got elements of that. In this, where, you know, I'm showing it's this sort of disintegrating the design again, that tries to help show an element of progression. The spacing in these arrows, the lines, you know, there's elements of, you know, ladders and tiers in these designs as well, where they're getting thinner and thicker as you get closer to the top. You know, this whole design here was started from this particular subset of progression. You know, I looked at this, I did some initial planning ideas similar to these, and the end result was effectively this. There was a lot of steps in between, you know, there's a lot of designs that I decided I didn't like, but ultimately the starting point for this design was this branch of this brand. Now to show that it's not the only thing that I did, when I designed this design, I also used this principle where this was my I think I did this in an hour or two. It was a very quick mock-up. This is not anything I don't think anything in this was used in the final design apart from the triangles. But the principle for this design, unlike this one where it's all about progression, this one was about ladders, and it was this area where it was, you know, leagues, tables, cups, tiers. Effectively, the idea behind these were like tables, you know, so you've got different tables with each of these triangles being one of the teams or people in the table, and the whole idea was that to visually represent tables and competition and showing different skill levels. You know, these could be graphs of someone's progression over time. And that's how I effectively started the design for the P90 Faceit, which is, as you might know, is now in the game. In the end, obviously, after doing this was just a very quick mock-up. I took this design and developed it further. You know, once you've got your sort of principle down, then it's more about trying to create something that's visually appealing. You know, not everybody's going to like this design, but the idea started from the league tables and the idea of visually representing that. In the end, I added these little coloured triangles, which were, you know, showing sort of up-and-coming players and people on the move and all this sort of stuff. I know some people watching this will think it sounds a bit silly, and I can completely understand that, but I found this approach particularly useful for me when trying to start a new design from scratch. If you'd like to see more videos from me and be kept up to date on the latest tutorials, there's a clickable link on screen to join my YouTube channel and links in the description to my Steam group and workshop. I really hope you've enjoyed what you've seen today. Thanks very much for watching, and I look forward to seeing your designs in the future.